Well, it is an exodus from Mexico. Students from south of the border are fleeing to the United States, enrolling in U.S. schools.
Channel 5's Will Ripley traveled to West Texas School District, where border violence is tearing families apart. He's live with a story.
Crossing the border into Mexico is like crossing into a war zone in many places. Mexican students are coming here to escape the violence. They cannot escape the suffering.
What he hasn't told me yet.
Tornillo School Superintendent Paul Vranish is leading his district through a crisis.
It's a bad thing. It's a sad thing.
The school counselor just had to break some devastating news.
She's got to go over there one morning and tell a 15-year-old freshman girl, your mother was killed today on the way to work.
The girl's mother was murdered in Mexico. Ongoing violence there has shattered many students' families.
He lost his father and his uncle. You know, we've had him lose cousins. We've had him lose brothers. We had one of our students get gunned down, one of our students.
He says many students are traumatized, sad, and afraid they might be next.
At what point do they not start becoming like school kids in Baghdad, Iraq?
It's the same story in nearby Fort Hancock. Hudspeth County Sheriff Arvin West says students have fled the violence in Mexico and enrolled in U.S. schools.
Well, the number one concern is somebody being kidnapped.
Lieutenant Robert Wilson says suspicious vehicles were spotted following Fort Hancock school buses.
The suspicions are that they were checking school routes and maybe where certain children were getting off.
Now, officers are patrolling the schools.
There have been some threats on some students and some teachers and people in the community.
Other school districts are alarmed at what's happening along the border.
Our superintendent had a concern, of course, safety of our kids.
In nearby Culberson County, sheriff's deputies now escort school buses to all sporting events in Fort Hancock. Another district chose to cancel its games altogether.
Or it will be a common practice if this thing doesn't get resolved.
But the kids...
Vranish says the worse it gets, the more his students are forced to cope.
They shouldn't have to do this.
It's a lesson in suffering. He says children on the border should never have to learn. You know, all of the students we approached while taping this story were too scared to go on camera. They said it would put their lives and their families' lives in danger. Now, here in the Valley, parents in Mexico are turning to Valley schools. They are using classrooms to keep their kids safe from the violence in Mexico. Channel 5's Pablo Sandoval is in Starr County, where one woman tells us the violence in Mexico literally landed on her front door.
One more murder. It happened only a few blocks south of here, on the other side of this international bridge in Miguel Alemán. It was death at her doorstep, the final mark of violence Rosie needed to move her child across the border into an American classroom. In the early morning light, Roma and Miguel Alemán are coming to life. Students are leaving their homes across the river in Mexico. They're trading life in a violent border town, finding peace in a Roma classroom. Children of all ages fleeing from the violence. Some catch a ride at the bridge, others walk to their campus. The fear of becoming a victim themselves kept many from telling their story. Then we met a woman we'll call Rosie. We walked with her and her 10-year-old son as they made their way to a nearby elementary. Rosie tells us conditions are very bad at home. La gente inocente está terminando siendo víctima.
Sí, hasta la gente inocente se la están también.
She says in Mexico, even innocent people become victims. She explains death came right to her door one day. A body landed there. It was what remained of the man she lived with. He'd been beheaded. Rosie immediately enrolled her son in the Roma school district.
Sí, más segura de este lado que de aquel lado. Porque allá como que no hay ley ahorita.
I feel my son can only be safe in a classroom on this side of the border, she points out. Over there, it's as if there is no law, no order. Parents like Rosie use a friend or family member's address here to enroll their children in American schools. It's happening up and down the border.
The border violence, without it has to affect our enrollment as well.
School district spokesman Ricardo Perez is seeing enrollment numbers steadily rise.
And we were expecting another decrease in enrollment, but such is not the case. We had an increase of about 55 students from one year to the next.
Perez says two things may be responsible for the increase: migrant families moving back to the valley and the growing danger brewing across the border.
Families are looking to enroll their children in our school district as well as other school districts just because of the fear factor for safety reasons.
The situation is very similar in neighboring Rio Grande City. The superintendent here tells us he's seen about 70 students enroll in the district since violence broke out across the border.
I know that if I were in the same shoes, I would definitely look at the safety of my family first. So I'm sure that that is a factor, that they feel that their child is probably going to be in a much safer environment here and not having to worry about that.
Rosie tells us the violence seems constant.
Toda la gente tiene miedo. Ya para las 8 de la noche, lo más tardado 9, ya no hay nadie en Miguel Alemán.
The people are scared, she says. By 8 p.m., nobody's on the streets in Miguel Alemán. They're empty. Rosie knows at the end of the day, she and her son have to make this trek across this bridge. They go back into Mexico, back to the danger and the unknown. But still, she is thankful for the few hours of peace for her son. A few hours in a classroom there in the United States of America. I'm Polo Sandoval, Channel 5 News at 10, Roma.
School districts up and down the border affected by all of this. Now, coming up tonight on Channel 5 News at 10:30, the drug cartel is terrorizing a Mexican border town, torturing and killing folks who refuse to leave. Now there's a mass exodus from Mexico. That story in a live report coming up on Channel 5 News at 10:30. For now, live in Hidalgo, Will Ripley, Channel 5 News at 10.